Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. Who knows when you'll see this video, and I've done a strange move in terms of filming it, but I'm like packing up my books because I have to move, which is not what I want, but that's life. But as I'm doing it, I thought I sort of may as well also talk about books I've read in the past month. So yes, welcome to Actual Spinster. I have like a box right here that I'm trying to fill out. Fill out? No, I'm trying to fill up, and I've already done almost 3 other boxes, not this size, so my bookshelves will look a little bit different, although I tried to keep this one kind of the same so that for filming for this it would look nice, but this one has been reshuffled. I don't know what I'll say, but basically I just thought I would talk about these 2 books right now because they were on my shelf, and I guess I'm gonna pack this one because it's a library book, so we'll see if I have spoons to return it before I move, or I'll just pack it, but maybe not in one of these boxes. But anyway, this is Beowulf by Seamus Heaney. So, well, it's not by Seamus Heaney, this is the translation by Seamus Heaney from Old English, and this is like an Old English poem from a long time ago that tells the story of Beowulf, who's this like hero. Yeah, and I unfortunately I think the plot of Beowulf is like a little bit lacking. Otherwise I think I could get like really into it and I could be more interested in like learning Old English in order to read it properly. I did technically learn like Anglo-Saxon Old English for like a sort of year course, or maybe just a term, I don't actually remember, but like during my undergraduate like English degree, but it was really very difficult and like the teaching was not very good. So I definitely don't really remember much from it from that perspective. But I did write like an essay about like another Old English poem, I remember that much, and I think we did have to do some translations and things. But yes, but not from Beowulf, from other shorter poems. Yeah, I think the thing that I enjoyed, I have already read this translation of Beowulf too, but I think the thing I most enjoyed about it was actually reading Seamus Heaney's notes, like his introduction, where he talks about the poem, although that part was like fine to me. But my favourite part was his section about the translation, where he basically sort of talks about his way into connecting to Old English poetry, like linguistic politics in terms of like Irish in particular, but also just histories of language that like both include colonization but also include like cultural crossover, like, you know, transnational sharing, rivers. Like there was, I really loved that section, and I just thought the way he described it all was like so kind of alive and animated, despite this being a very old poem, and also a poem that has been returned to and translated by many people aside from him. And I feel like he really brought his own particular like personal like history of language and literature to it in a way that was really lovely. Because obviously he was a poet. I also did feel like this time I was really struck with the vividity of some of the scenes, especially around like the dragon, if I remember correctly, which was also like enjoyable to kind of read. I read this like really quite fast. I read it like in one day over Shabbos, which was really fun too, and also a little strange, I guess. But yeah, I do want to read a few other translations of Beowulf. I think this is the translation that I'm the most familiar with. I must have read another, but maybe I didn't, I don't remember. So yeah, I'd be really intrigued to kind of read. There's a few that I'd like to check out, including a much more like an even more kind of contemporary one, as well as more scholarly ones. And obviously Tolkien has like a particularly famous one because it's Tolkien, although I'm not sure that I'm that interested in reading it, but I don't know, I might. And you know, he's also famous for his own like literary criticism of Beowulf itself. But yeah, I will, I guess, keep you updated with my journey in reading Beowulf translations, if I do any more of them. Another book I read was Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian by Hazel Jane Plant, which is an encyclopedia, sort of. So this is like a pretty short sort of novel about, I mean, majorly I would say about grief and memory through the lens of a obsession, like a shared obsession with a TV show called Little Blue. The main character, she's a trans woman, and her trans woman friend Vivian has died recently, and as a way to grieve her and remember her and you know, spend time thinking and caring about her, the narrator writes an encyclopedia for this TV show that they both loved, but specifically that Vivian introduced the main character to. And yeah, like literally just goes through like Inky is the Gorse's piebald horse, and like the characters and like various other things. We do also get stuff outside of that, which I actually I was surprised by. I thought it was just all going to be in the encyclopedia entries, but it wasn't really. And yeah, I thought this was like sweet. I guess I was like maybe a little disappointed and like sort of with some distance from it. I feel like it was just kind of slight in a way. I think unfortunately there were also times where I did feel it was like verging a little on sort of maybe like overly saccharine stuff, but I did also like the way that it was talking about loving and grieving a friend, and I like stories about grief generally, and I'm, you know, yeah, I have also been in the position of grieving friends, and especially friends that you share like certain interests, and it is very meaningful to the main character, that Vivian and her share some particular, although not all, experiences of being like trans women in a world that doesn't like or care about them in the way that they should be cared about. And so they offer a lot to each other, and the main character definitely kind of learns and is inspired by the way Vivian like lives her life as herself. I think that is definitely a kind of reader who would really enjoy this, and I guess I was just maybe like I had like kind of built it up in my head a bit too much for it to deliver, really, because I just thought it was gonna just like adore it so much, because I really love the concept. I think the name is like really lovely, like Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian, like really just loved that. But then yeah, I think yeah, it wasn't like as good as I wanted it to be. I did, I think, give it like 3.5 stars. Like I still really enjoyed it. I just, yeah. Okay, into the box it goes. A book I read some of in June was The Colony by Audrey McKee, which I DNF'd probably like, well, I sort of like skimmed the ending because I did sort of want to see what happened, / I was sort of like, yeah, I don't know, but basically I think the main problem with this book is it's like a book about sort of like language and the Irish language and colonization and sort of losing languages, and you know, like British imperialism, but also just, yeah, like sort of linguistic stuff, linguistic identity, those kinds of things, which all really interest me. But I would have preferred this to be like a a non-fiction book. And also I felt like as a novel it didn't do anything particularly interesting with those ideas. It was just those ideas, which like we know. I don't know, I just was a bit like, oh. It does also center like a really annoying man who's like a artist. It's set in the 1970s, so it's also during a really particular time in terms of like Irish Republican like struggles, violence, so forth. It's kind of like trying to also talk about that too, but again I just felt like I was a bit like, and also I did think it was like a little bit obvious what was going to happen, I guess. So yeah, I won't be packing this book to like come with me, so that's why I talked about it now. I'm back to pack some more and to continue to talk about the things I read in June. Ow. I've had like a really strange reading month, which I guess is sort of understandable considering life. But basically the next thing I read was Ide and Olive, or Ide et Olive, which is a French poem. It's a chanson de geste, which is like basically a particular kind of literary form that comes out of like old French literary culture, and it's, yes, a long poem. And this poem is, I thought it was really fascinating. It kind of does take on the story of, what's it called? Donkey Skin. At least it starts there, with like a king who's being horrible and creepy and wants to marry his daughter because his wife died, and he's like, I will never marry a woman as beautiful or as good as my wife. And then he's like, oh, but my daughter is that, so... And it's gross. And so his daughter Ede runs away. And she runs away and becomes a knight. And so it's a really fascinating poem about gender. And it's kind of crazy because it's, you know, it's very medieval, it's very... And obviously I read this in translation. I read a translation by Munawa Abuchi, I think, which came out in 2018. And it is available free online, so I will link it so you can check it out if you want. I definitely recommend it. Like, I thought it was really fantastic, and just fascinating, and honestly quite exciting and just like thrilling and dazzling in a way, because it is so queer, even if, you know, it's also got all of these kind of like caveats and provisos, but it's also, yeah, like, and it's so, I mean, I felt quite strongly that Ede was not necessarily experiencing trans feelings herself, but the way that gender is performative is very sort of evidently explored in it, because she becomes a knight, and when she does, she has the power of a knight, of like masculinity and chivalry, and she's able to do these feats that like aren't really like even commented on, that she shouldn't be able to do them because she was originally a princess, you know, and instead it's kind of like, well, of course, because she's a knight, she can do it. She's taking on like a masculine persona. And then I also really loved Olive in the story, because I felt like she had a sort of level of desire and agency that was like really lovely. And I think like Ede's agency is somewhat attenuated, both from the perspective of like how she begins, where she begins in terms of like running away from her awful father, but also at the end her agency is not necessarily kind of heeded. But at the same time, you know, there's a sort of ending to the story, but then it's kind of like, well, does that actually mean that she was turned into a man at the end? Or, you know, like... And I definitely think, like, from a kind of queer reading perspective, you can interpret it however you'd like. But yeah, and like Olive, you know, is struck by her and is like, wow, this is one of the... Like, I've never felt this way about a knight before. Like, what a beautiful knight. Which is very gay. Yeah, and there's also a really sweet scene with her as well in their, like, marriage bed. So, like, yeah, really, I really enjoyed it, and I would really recommend it. I think it's one of those things that gives you, like, this really tantalizing kind of insight into, like, particular time periods. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the manuscript was from, like, 1311 or something, so we're talking kind of late 1200s, early... or like, yeah, 13th century, late 13th century into 14th century kind of poetry and writing. I think, yeah, no, I have read something else that's Old French, but I think otherwise I haven't read that much Old French poetry, and always I will have done it in translation because I can't read Old French. What was really cool about the version that I read was that it did also have the Old French next to it, so you could look across. And I don't really know French, but I know like a little bit, so I was looking to kind of see, and it is interesting how Old French has this like sort of strange, like familiar unfamiliarness to it, because there are parts where you're like, that seems very not how, like, that seems not very French, you know, it seems almost like more Spanish or just more like Latin-y, and then other parts where you're like, yeah, that's French. Which, yeah, I do also feel like, the similarity between Old French and French, I have no idea if this is true, but I feel like from my very lay person not understanding or knowing things really perspective, is that in terms of like Old French and French versus Old English and English, the differences between Old English and English is more than Old French and French. I feel like, I don't know if that's true, but just in the sense that like it's really hard to understand Old English, whereas Old French, I think if you know French, you'd be able to get some amount, even if there's obviously going to be words and like phrases, and obviously it's also like, we say Old French, we say Old English, and there is like linguistic diversity and, you know, like dialects within those. I think the Ede and Olive poem was maybe like Picard, which is like a dialect that's like sort of around Paris during that time. I think that was what it said. The version I read also had like an introduction thing, but I actually read the poem first and then I read the introductory stuff. And I thought the introductory stuff was like interesting. It wasn't like, maybe I wouldn't necessarily have interpreted it everything that they said like myself, I think, like, so yeah. But anyway, really excellent and interesting like literary experience. Would definitely recommend it. Yeah, kind of a strange little gem. I gotta actually pack a box now, you know. Haven't made much actual progress because I was yapping. Okay, the next section of books I'd like to talk about are the first, I think, 6 volumes of Witch Hat Atelier. The internet is failing me right now, so I can't look up who it's by, but I will like put the pictures of the manga here. I've been reading this pretty fast. This is also like the only thing I've been able to read in recent weeks, I would say. But it is like enjoyable. So Witch Hat Atelier is about like, it's sort of very classic magic story. It's about a girl who wants to be a witch, you know, in a world where like you have to be born a witch to be a witch, except when she discovers that actually that's not the case, and you can be a witch if you just know how to make magic. And so she accidentally casts magic. Her mother is turned to like sort of crystal or stone, I think, and in doing so she meets a professor called Kifri who offers to teach her instead of erasing her memory, so that she can learn magic and also undo the magic that happened to her mother. It has also recently been turned into an anime, which I haven't watched, but I think I might once I've read. I think the whole series is complete, but I could be wrong. There's like a lot of volumes, but I am also reading it very fast and it's definitely getting better as I go. I'm really quite enjoying it. I really like what it says about children's autonomy and that also education. I feel like lots of stories about learning things, or like, I guess maybe it's not true that it's lots, but I really like stories that engage meaningfully and deeply with the process of learning and what it means to teach, like in terms of like pedagogy and like what's good. Like I think it's just really, yeah, I really like how the series takes seriously like what learning magic would be and like what having magic tutors would be like, and what those magic tutors should act like in terms of like their ethics. I don't know, I kind of didn't expect that, but like also I don't really know what I expected. I just kind of had heard that there was like interesting stuff about this series in terms of disability, and I also saw some really cute drawings on Tumblr, which made me be like, oh yes, I've been kind of keeping my eye out for this for a little while. And then when I was like not being able to read anything and like looking for something to like escape into and just like take my mind off stuff and like the stress of moving and also just everything, I was like, oh, maybe I should check this out. And there have been some interesting, there's like one particular character who has, I can't remember what they call it, but it means that his eyesight is impacted by like silveriness, and so he like can't become a witch, but I'm imagining that's not the end of his story. Yeah, I will say I don't really like, there's like a way that some of the emotions, or like particularly one kind of emotion, is like drawn on the characters' faces, which I really dislike, and I think at points it is just a bit like overly cutesy for me, but in general I think it's fine. And also I feel like it's gotten less as the volumes have gone on, and like I said, I've definitely enjoyed it more. I feel like the very first one is fairly just kind of like tropey beginning to a magical story, whereas I think as you get more and more into it, it becomes more and more interesting and kind of like more complicated. And yeah, there's like a whole force of kind of people who practice forbidden magic, which is magic that like is on people's bodies and that is no longer allowed. And there's sort of witch factionalism, witch power struggles, and stuff like that. And I mean, there are also clearly kind of like witch cops, and I always feel like saddened when magical stories tend to have like cops in. I think it's quite common for there to be like magic cops in stories like this, but you know, I'll be intrigued to kind of see what's happening. And like, you know, there are also it is like fairly tropey in terms of like Coco, the main character, that's her name. Yeah, there is definitely like some sort of unknowing chosen one type stuff going on, but I'm still really enjoying it. And yeah, I don't know when like, I don't know how many volumes I'm gonna have read by the end of this month, honestly. Like, I might read a few more after I finish recording this, although I suppose there's what, 1 or 2 days left of the month, but I'm on the 6th volume already, and I, like I said, read them quite fast, so who knows. But either way, it's like a series that I am like reading, and I do kind of find it just hard to stop, because like once you start, you just keep going. It is in chapters and stuff, but like, yeah. I also will say, I think the clothes, that was also another thing that made me keep reading, I mean, is I feel like the way that the clothes are drawn is really like beautiful. They often have like really nice kind of like intricate details, and it's black and white, but yeah, I just really like it. And I love uniform, and I love the like cute little uniforms that they wear. Yeah, I don't know, it's just nice. Like it's really sweet, and definitely something that like is nice to read during a time of chaos and stress. And like I said, I think it does also really like particularly pay attention to like children's experience of learning, and also for grounding their autonomy whilst they are learning, which I think is something that is often missing from people's non-magical experiences of schooling and education. And I don't think it should be, and I don't think it has to be, in order to learn things and to know things in a deep and like careful way. Okay, that was kind of like a bit of a whatever, I don't know. I'm gonna keep filling up this box, but I can't fill it all the way up because I think it'll be way too heavy. But I just have like so many books still. I mean, it's getting less and less. I don't have like any basically, except from one big one on this bookshelf anymore, and then there is this shelf that you can't really see, and then the leftovers on this middle shelf, and oh, and then also these ones, I guess. Let's just check how heavy this is. Oh, it's not heavy at all. Okay. I think I'm gonna leave it in there for now. I do still have some books to pack, but I'm getting through them, and I think I have 3, maybe 4 more boxes to make. Actually, I think only 3, but hopefully if I can spread them around amongst those boxes, it'll be okay. Yeah, gotta pack my puzzles too. Cool. I think that's everything I had to share for this strange higgledy-piggledy moving June reading wrap-up video. I hope you haven't had to move house recently. I hope you're having a good day when you're watching this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!